Welcome to College Football Playoff Top 25, presented by Allstate.
A benchmark of the season is here. All the blood, sweat, and exhilaration poured out just for the right to start the fight to the finish. The college football playoff rankings arrived the night before Halloween, and some teams are wearing a mask, not the identity of a true contender. But for those who taste the treat of a lofty perch tonight, they know that tricks are just around the corner. Take Michigan, for instance. Penn State is looming, eager to pull them into their misery. Texas hoping to do the exact same thing to West Virginia. And Notre Dame figures to be top 3, top 4. And Northwestern trip, horror flick waiting to happen. Georgia and Kentucky fight for a division on Saturday, but they know the loser has its playoff dream turn into a ghost. And then the battle on the Bayou between Alabama and LSU. Can the Bayou Bengals finally be the ones to push Tua into the fourth quarter? Or will it be LSU with a white-hot defense in the fourth quarter and at full strength, ready for the tie? The rankings are here. We'll see them when you do.
Who's in? As the season moves to November, making the playoff is becoming a real possibility. So is being left out. Now, the calculations commence. All the data is being considered. And as each week ticks by, the field narrows and opportunities vanish. Rule number 1, don't lose. Rule number 2, don't quit. An upset disrupts the whole field, leaving every team scrambling, jockeying for position.
You give it all you got!
There will only be 4. Who's in?
The symbolic hat rack. That is where committee members are instructed to leave their allegiances and their hats at the door. There are 6 new committee members this year. 9 of them have to recuse themselves from teams. 13 teams involved. Obviously, all 13 not under top 25 consideration, but that's what they do to make sure the discussions are objective. Rece Davis, Joey Galloway, David Pollack, and Jesse Palmer. Kirk Herbstreit joins us in a little bit. Rob Mullins, the new selection committee chair. Paul Feinbaum, Chris Fowler, Dabo Sweeney, all kinds of voices.
How long is this show?
Only an hour, so we got to go. What are you most looking forward to?
I just want to see what they do with the resume of LSU, which could look outstanding with 3 top 10 wins, Miami and Auburn, who've now fallen off now, but the rankings weren't coming out there. Georgia, a terrific win, and Mississippi State also. So I want to see what they do with that resume. They give them all 3 top 10 wins, they can move this team all the way up to number 2.
Yeah, and the committee, very much so in the past, has been about what you have done. So I'm very curious to see if already out the gate they're going to go, we think this team, Alabama, is the best. It's not going to be resume. It's going to be you've seen them hit people in the face with a frying pan repeatedly throughout the season. So is it about the resume to this point, or is it about what you see and what you believe already?
And a big hot topic has been, can UCF become the first group of 5 team to reach the playoff after going unbeaten last year and self-proclaiming a national championship? They passed the eye test up to this point. Mackenzie Milton's looked great at quarterback, but they just don't have the resume. They don't have an impressive schedule. That'll start on Thursday against Temple. So where does UCF start, and how much ground do they have to gain?
They're top 10 in the AP. I'll be a little surprised if they're top 10 in these initial rankings, but we'll see. Kirk Herbstreit is here with us. Kirk, what are you most looking forward to?
You guys touched on most of it. I can't wait to just see the one-loss teams, how they're stacked up. You can make a case probably for each one of them, but when they lost, how they lost, away from home, at home, disappointing, some disappointing, embarrassing losses along the way. So just how the new members in that room, how they rank things like that. Because one thing I've learned is the committee in the past, they don't worry about the AP poll and the coaches poll. They do what they think is right based on their metrics and based on the eye test, and we'll get a feel for that starting tonight.
And Kirk, that feel, as I mentioned, that's going to be different. Nearly half the committee, new members, 6 of the 13. A refresher on what the criteria that the committee uses. Conference championships won. Obviously, no one has that on the resume yet. Strength of schedule, head-to-head, outcomes against common opponents without incenting margin of victory too much. But, I mean, it just stands to reason. A 21-point win is better than a 1-point win. And the catch-all other relevant factors.
Can you define that, please?
That is subjectivity. I think that's eye test. I think that's football judgment. All of the things that can be injuries, can be quarterback changes, which we've had a lot of them at the top. So remember, we don't see the rankings until you do as we take a look at this week's college football playoff rankings brought to you by Allstate. Virginia gets in the top 25, and so does 3-loss Iowa State.
Yeah, Iowa State's going to be important to the Big 12. There's some teams in the Big 12 that are saying, hey, we're still alive, we have a chance. The resume of Iowa State will matter to those teams.
Tell you another thing, you got 3 ACC teams in there too. That can be helpful to say Clemson's strength of schedule. Moving on up the rankings as we see 25 through 21 and now 16 through 20. Iowa Hawkeyes coming off a loss. Texas too are 16 and 17. 2 more 3-loss teams, this time from the SEC.
And I think a lot of people were wondering whether or not Texas A&M was going to be in the rankings after losing this past weekend, but that obviously a team that can help the resume of, say, a Clemson or an Alabama.
And LSU later.
And 2 of their losses were to Clemson and Alabama. So, I mean, come on, let's be honest here.
Fair point. And Syracuse almost beat Clemson, and yet another ACC team. People have said maybe Clemson's schedule wasn't as strong as it should have been, and now a lot of ranked teams and potential moments on the schedule.
And a problem already for the Pac-12 because there's no Pac-12 teams at the bottom. That'll be an issue for Washington State. Some of those teams we'll see in a little bit.
You'll probably see a couple maybe in the top 15, and there is one right on cue. The Pac-12 team surging Utah is at 15. How about West Virginia with 1 loss? And you were looking for UCF. They're higher than they were last year when they started.
They're at number 12, and again, they have their toughest games coming up. Starting Thursday against Temple, you look down the road to Cincy, USF, maybe Houston, and the American Championship game. So all the meat on their schedule still coming up.
So that's 11 through 25 of the initial college football playoff rankings. Kirk, you have UCF sitting at 12, undefeated. You have some 3-loss teams in the top 25. What stuck out to you so far?
The depth of the ACC, I kind of feel like it's not necessarily a great year. I think anytime some of your big names, Florida State, Miami, Virginia Tech, these teams don't have great years, you kind of feel that conference is down. I was pleasantly surprised to see the ACC have 4 teams up in the top 25 so far. And the other thing that stood out is what Jesse said, is UCF up at number 12. And that's just based on, if you look at their strength of schedule and you look at their ranking in the computer, they're not necessarily that high. So that would give them a lot of optimism as far as looking at what's ahead on their schedule and reason to believe that they may be able to get at least up at some point. You wonder where the ceiling might be, or will they be able to continue to climb?
It'll be interesting to see what Rob Mullen says later about whether UCF has built some equity. And look, they do their very best to only look at this year, the 7 wins this year. But there were 13 of them last year and no losses, 20 in a row for UCF. How did that equity play into where the Knights wind up ranked right now? You got any issue with the depth of the ACC so far?
No. No, listen, I think that here's the thing. I look at NC State being that high after the last 2 weeks. I think, to me, I would not rank NC State that high. It wasn't remotely competitive with Clemson. And then last week, obviously, to follow that up, I would question a little bit. I would question that. There's some other teams that I could push up there. But listen, when you start getting to the bottom, y'all do this exercise at home. Yeah. This is hard to do. It's hard to do the bottom of 25.
Yeah, I started looking at conferences, and so the Pac-12 needed someone. Yeah. They needed someone besides Utah to be in. Washington State, if they have their chance, then their resume now, as they move forward, where's the big wins that they can collect? Washington not being in there. The Stanford win now is no good for not just Washington State, but also hurts Notre Dame's resume. Well, so these teams that we look at in this range, resume builders, and a lot of people lost some resume tonight already.
And we'll see how that resume might change as the rankings go on in future weeks. Let's look at the top 10 now and start with number 10, Ohio State making it into the top 10. Buckeyes have had a week off to try to take care of some problems. Urban Meyer's team sitting there at number 10. Meyer addressed his health issues today. At number 9, Kentucky's top 5 strength of record metric, meaning how well you've done against your schedule, and the Wildcats unbeaten in regulation, only in overtime loss.
The win at Florida was very, very impressive, and I just love the way this team plays football from an eye test standpoint. Their ability to run the ball, play complementary football. They play really good defense on that side of the ball.
Dirty defense.
They're going to give Georgia a handful this week.
Terry Wilson just had his best game against Missouri. And the question about Kentucky, could they pass if they had to? They had to beat Missouri in the fourth quarter.
Just ahead of the Wildcats at number 8, That's some pretty good respect for Mike Leach's Cougars. Only loss came late against USC. There was a disputed targeting call. I don't know if it's a disputed loss, but they would have had a better opportunity perhaps to win. And a field goal blocked after that kept it from going into overtime. At number 7, Oklahoma. Only loss in the Red River game.
But I think the big question with them is what's the marquee win so far for them? Iowa State probably. People still have questions about their defense. Very critical, I think, that West Virginia was number 13. That's a game coming up. Texas also ranked, I think, 17, 18, around that area. Oklahoma needs those teams to keep winning to build their resume later this year.
West Virginia's saying the same thing you're saying. They still have Texas. They still have Oklahoma and could get to the Big 12 championship game. They're saying don't forget about us as we have focused a lot of energy on Oklahoma and just Texas out of the Big 12. West Virginia's still knocking on the door.
Yeah, you know, if West Virginia could make it to that Big 12 championship game, in theory, they would likely have 2 wins over Oklahoma, which would carry a lot of weight. So, Kirk, you see how they've stacked up those one-loss teams. A lot of respect for Kentucky. Did you agree with what you saw?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be impressed with what Kentucky's done. You guys touched on what Terry Wilson did. That was the mystery. I mean, it looked like they couldn't complete a pass there for a couple weeks, and then just when it looked like they were done and out, he ends up coming up with some big plays to give them a lot of optimism for this week against Georgia with their defense. I think Washington State is up there in striking distance. I know we're kind of saying, well, they don't necessarily have anybody left on their schedule. The one thing at the end of the day, if they keep winning, that could hurt them. Possibly would be that non-conference schedule. If they're in that 4, 5, 6 range and they're in that debate, the non-conference could definitely catch up to them. But those teams on that panel right there, even though they want to be on the next panel, all those teams from the top to the bottom are still obviously well within striking distance. And if they went out, teams ahead of them are going to lose, and they're going to work their way back up and eventually get to that top panel if they keep winning.
Yeah, and I think it's fair if you start looking at so far, will y'all agree so far that it's not as much about as in the past when it was what you've done? Because I think Kentucky would have been a little bit – I think you could have put Kentucky ahead of Oklahoma so far for what they've done. When you talk about
Mississippi State, Florida schedule.
You beat Florida, obviously, who has a tremendous amount of respect. Obviously, you lose in overtime to A&M. You beat Mississippi State. I think, to me, that's a way more impressive than what Oklahoma's done. They're able to look and say, I think Oklahoma's better. So I think you're already seeing – I think that's different from what we've seen in the past. The past years, I think it's been a lot about – last year, who was number 1? When we started the first ranking.
It was Georgia.
Georgia. Everybody thought it was. Every AP voter thought it was, except for
all but 2.
1 or 2, thought it was Alabama. So you're seeing that they're definitely not. It's not all about what you've done so far. It is about what they think about you and what they're seeing on tape.
But then ultimately, at the end, they've made the decisions based on teams that they thought were better. Alabama last year, Ohio State the year before that, making it.
But it felt more in the past like it was what you've done.
Just.
Who you beat. If you hadn't beat anybody good, they weren't going to move you up regardless. It was going to take some time.
And it's early. You know what I mean? We have not even got into this thing yet. And so it's early to try to put our finger on what this committee is telling us. We haven't seen what they've done at the top. Still looking for LSU and where that plays out. Michigan and where that plays out. And so as this thing moves forward, though, you start to look and say, when you talk about Oklahoma, they, like Alabama, are tough to ignore. Regardless of who they've played, how they've done it when they've won their games, took a tough loss to Texas, but when they've won, boy, have they looked good. And they're a kind of team that you look at and say, I don't know who's beating them because I don't know who can slow down this offense. To beat them, you're going to have to score 50 points.
This is a thing, too, where these teams' trajectories change so quickly. We were all so big on Ohio State. We just saw Ohio State ranked at number 10. The trajectory for them right now and the decline after the way they lost to Purdue and the question marks we have on defense and their ability to run the football effectively the last 2 weeks. But they're within striking distance right now, sitting at number 10. They could have a 6-win Michigan State team coming up. The big one, obviously, is Michigan. It'll be interesting to see where the committee has them ranked, and of course a Big Ten championship game too. So if you're Urban Meyer in Ohio State, you know, licking your wounds in the bye week after that loss, you're sitting in pretty good position right here in the first rank.
All right, let's see how everything looks at the top. David alluded to it. Last year, Alabama had 59 of the 61 AP votes. They were number 2. This year, they have all 60, and they have the blessing of the committee, at least for week 1. The Crimson Tide start off number 1 in the college football playoff rankings. That hasn't always boded well necessarily in the playoff. Just behind Clemson. Have we seen this movie before in the playoffs?
I feel like we've seen that
on repeat. Know the credits.
Clemson, 1, 2. Let's see who's at number 3. The next 2 could be very interesting. LSU One-loss LSU, lost on the road at Florida, but that great strength of record, sitting there ahead of an undefeated team.
Yeah, and again, that was what I was waiting on. I wanted to see what they gave them credit for. They're giving them credit for an Auburn win, a Miami win. Even though those teams now are not ranked and they have 3 losses, they're still giving them credit for beating them early on. And this LSU team, if they can correct their passing, sort of like the Kentucky team we just talked about, if they can get a better passing game, look out Alabama in 5 days.
And you know what this means, too. Now in the 5th year of the playoff, more than half of the teams in the initial rankings from the SEC. Let's see who's at number 4. One would assume Notre Dame, and it is. The Fighting Irish, a tough road test coming up against Northwestern, a dangerous Northwestern team on Saturday night. So those are the teams that start in the top 4. LSU should know that no number 3 team in the initial rankings has ever made the playoff.
Why bring up old stuff, Rece? That's not what they wanted to hear. Not what they wanted to hear.
Well, at least Notre Dame was 3 last year, and that is followed by Michigan and Georgia at 5 and 6 now. So the Wolverines, look, the Wolverines are in great position now. They've got everything in front of them. They have Penn State this weekend. They've got Ohio State at the end, and Georgia too, starting with this weekend against Kentucky. So Kirk, does this top 4 and the top 6 look about the way you anticipated?
Yeah, that's exactly the 6 that I had. I had LSU there at 3, just a little bit ahead of Notre Dame, and Michigan at 5, Georgia 6. And I think with Michigan, you just touched on, they're on this revenge tour, and they've taken care of business. You got to give them credit with Wisconsin, Michigan State on the road. They get Penn State this week. They still have Ohio State and Columbus. If they keep winning, Big Ten championship. So you're right. Everything is in front of them, and they control their own destiny. Georgia's got to be careful this week, as we've been talking about with that trip into Kentucky. LSU and Notre Dame, somewhat of a moot point because of the game this Saturday in Baton Rouge. If they lose that game, they will go to the back of the line. If they win that game, it becomes very interesting, because what would they do with Alabama if Alabama were to lose a close game to LSU, as dominant as they have been against lesser opponents? How far down would Alabama potentially lose? So you don't want to just jump to conclusions about any games, especially anytime you got to go into Death Valley. But yeah, this for me, week 1, this pretty much laid out exactly how I thought it would go.
And guys, this is all going to change. And correct me if I'm wrong, but
you're wrong.
In the 4 rankings the last 4 years,
thing, Dave.
8 of the 16 teams in the initial ranking in the last 4 years of the playoff have lost the first or second game after the initial ranking. So there's going to be a lot of shakeup. So don't get too crazy about this. I think what's interesting about this, though, it talks about eye test, with Alabama being number 1, because Texas A&M is the only ranked team that they've beaten on their schedule. But when you've watched them play, guys, they've just been so dominant. The way they play offense, and Tua's a Heisman front run. They've scored 28 points in the first quarter in 3 games. This, to me, has looked like Nick Saban's best team. So maybe a bit of an indicator in terms of where the committee, how they're prioritizing.
And the thing I love about the playoff era is now, because of the resume issues, Ohio State and Michigan will be the biggest Northwestern fans on the planet, because they need Northwestern to knock off Notre Dame, because later on, if Northwestern gets to the Big Ten championship game, that's going to be another resume builder, so that sets up a situation that whoever comes out of the Big Ten gets into the playoff. And so as we look at these resumes and moving forward, who got games left, you start rooting for that other team that you have to face. Ohio State wants Michigan to win their games. Michigan wants Ohio State to win their games, because they need resume points.
Well, Michigan and all those teams in the top 6, who cares? It doesn't really matter. All you got to do is take care of your business. Mm-hmm. Every single one of them. They're in the driver's. I mean, LSU and Alabama are obviously going to play each other. Everybody, all you got to do is win. I mean, it doesn't matter. If you're an Irish fan and you're sitting there going, this sucks. How are we not? We're undefeated. It doesn't matter. Run the table, win your ball games. You're sitting in the college football.
But I do think that's important. Notre Dame, I think, has to run the table. We talked about this last week. Can Notre Dame afford a loss and still get in? This past weekend, you saw Stanford, Virginia Tech, and USC lose.
I think it depends on how they look, and that'll play out over the last month of the season.